Okay, you're all set.
All right, thank you. So welcome back, everyone. This is our first meeting for 2023. That's right, Becca, right? And sorry about the delayed start today, but we will start with approving the minutes for December 21, 2022 meetings. Hopefully all the participants have had a chance to review those. Any questions or comments? Okay, in the absence of that, all in favor?
I make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
I'm in favor.
Becca, aye.
Deidre, aye.
Melissa, aye. Virginia, you're muted.
I abstain.
Thank you. Becca, so we passed the minutes and approved them as written?
I think that's Miriam joining us. Yeah, so minutes are approved. The second item on the agenda was to have Kristen Wickstead come in. Kristen
Right.
is the she's the select board liaison to the DEI committee. Unfortunately, Kristen couldn't make it tonight. She had a family matter come up. So I told her that we would put a placeholder on for her to come in on the next meeting and she could introduce herself. So we'll do that in April.
Sure, thank you. Then the next item on the agenda was update on the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan project.
Yeah, so I don't have a super detailed update on this. I just want to let the committee know that the contract has been executed with DAC, Disability Access Consultants. So they're the company that we chose to move forward with for the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan grant that we received. They had a kickoff meeting with Scott Charpentier, the DPW director, and Sean Thompson, who's a facilities manager. They're going to be they're hoping to start work in late March. Most of their work is weather permitting because it's mostly outdoors. Looking at facilities, access, sidewalks, things of that nature. So if the snow holds off, fingers crossed, they're going to be out and about starting in late March or early April, weather permitting. So as that process kicks off and they start the process, I'll be sure to provide updates to the committee. And once we have a draft, certainly provide I'll have Sean and or Scott come in and give a brief presentation to the committee on the outcomes and the next steps for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Becca. So the next item on our agenda, any questions from the committee members on what Becca just told us about? Okay, thank you. Then moving on to the next item, which is an update on the application to the Massachusetts Community Compact Grant Program.
Sorry for being so slow on this, but I was curious how long the assessment is going to take, or do they have a time frame?
Yeah, so actually the grant has to be expended before the end of the fiscal year. So they're going to do the assessment in the spring and we have to have a final report by June 30th. So we'll have something in hand for the start of next fiscal year. The idea was to turn it around fairly quickly because the Mass Office on Disability has a construction grant program that follows immediately the transition plan grant, and that opens up in the fall. So our plan was to have the transition plan done by the late spring, early summer to prepare us to apply for the construction grant in the fall.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you, Becca. All right, so sorry, we'll go back to an update on the application to Massachusetts Community Compact Grant Program?
Sure. So I don't know if everyone had a chance to read my memo. The state of Massachusetts has a program called the Community Compact Grant Program. And essentially it's a set of best practices in a variety of disciplines set by municipal leaders in partnership with the state. And the state sets aside grant funding for communities to essentially implement best practices. Last year, they created a new discipline of DEI, whereby they'll actually fund projects to communities to implement, what is considered DEI best practices in municipal work. One of those categories is the completion of an equity audit. So you can apply for funding through the state to conduct an equity audit in your community. When the initial committee met, part of the recommendation was to develop a strategic plan. And that is still a goal that I know that the prior committee have, and I believe that this committee has as well, is ultimately to put together a strategic plan. But before we embark on that, the completion of an equity audit is intended to sort of identify the gaps that we have in advance of creating a roadmap for how to address the gaps. And so in the spring, the town will qualify for a community compact grant. And I'm hoping that with the committee's support, we can put forth an application to conduct an equity audit. If the grant were to be received by the town, we will put out an RFP. This committee would be involved in the selection of vendors and sort of manage that project. There'll be a community outreach component, discussion with departments. So I'm hopeful that we can get the grant, and this committee can work on choosing a vendor and moving forward with that project. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. If you have questions, it's not a given right now. Like I said, we don't qualify for the grant until the spring round, because we received the grant last fall. So you have to complete one before you start another, which makes perfect sense. But I think that it would be a good project for this committee to be involved in, and it's something that I think the community would appreciate. So I'm happy to answer questions, or if anybody has any thoughts on that.
Is there a way to access specifics of the equity audit? What's covered in it?
So that's one of the things that we would talk about as a committee. Some places are very, like, they just want to focus on racial equity and do a race equity audit, and what are the barriers to receiving services from the community, and how does that relate to race. We can do that. We can also look at it more broadly. What barriers are there to people who experience discrimination, or who are underprivileged, and try to not only look at race, but look at all categories of discrimination, race, gender, how does poverty impact people and their access to services. So, I think it's a discussion that we can have. I've seen communities just focus on housing, like we just want to talk about housing. I would like to approach it a little bit more broad. What are the barriers to all services that the town offers, and how does that impact people in the community?
Great. So there's flexibility there, so we could kind of focus in on what Northborough's specific needs would be and kind of tailor it to that to get the best amount of feedback and information.
Yeah.
So, Becca, how do we go about, broadening our horizon and going beyond, the very important topic of racial discrimination, but also, as you broadly laid out, other issues, discrimination against potential discrimination against people with disabilities, the underprivileged people. Is that a lot of work, or is that work that's an ongoing thing and we just have to build on it within our town? And how can we help?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think that's kind of the question that the audit will seek to answer. What are the barriers? Is everybody aware of all the services that the town offers? And if they're not, why aren't they? Like, what are the communication means that we're using to try to reach people? How can we do better? I think part of the challenge is like, we don't know what we don't know. Like I can't really answer that question because that's what I want a consultant to help us do. A big part of what we would be asking of them is surveying the community to get, and the committee did some of this. The initial committee did a small survey, which may help to inform us when we write the RFP. So we have an idea of sort of, where just the initial gaps that we would like to focus on based on the results of that survey. But I think that, part of the process will be data collection, and using that information to sort of inform the decisions that the community will make moving forward about policy making, and ensuring that everybody has equitable access to all the services that we provide.
Thank you. Would it also be helpful if we sort of looked at the feedback from the community itself? I'm sure people write into the community, email us, to the town, and email the council all the time about issues that they're experiencing in their personal life or their family members or friends. And is there some way of looking at those and see what are the important issues for our community?
Yeah, certainly, part of it will also be interviewing departments. All the, different departments have different interactions with different populations of people, depending on what service they're providing. And so getting some of that anecdotal data from those departments will be critical in this process. And certainly, I think we want to make sure that it's not just a survey, but maybe maybe we can have a community listening session where we provide the opportunity for people to come in and, talk about some of the challenges they've had. Some people are going to be comfortable doing that. Some people are going to want to answer an anonymous survey. And we want to provide that option, both options.
Thank you, Becca.
Hi guys, Miriam here. So, sorry you can't completely see me. I'm in the car, but I do think that an equity audit is a critical next point for us as a DEIB committee. We did do a survey last year that we sent out to the community. So we do have some of that insight, but I think an equity audit is a great next point for us to kind of figure out where we want to go from here and what we want from this committee.
Thanks, ma'am. And the school department did do I believe the school department has done an equity audit. Deirdre, is that, yeah.
Yes, they did an equity audit and surveyed kind of all stakeholders. So, and they had, the group that did the equity audit had, I guess, semi-structured interviews with people, like parents, teachers, students, as well as there were surveys that were done, and then they rolled out a report. I think I have access to that report if we want to just take a look. I can try to dig it out, but also I'm curious if we have access to, I guess, grants that have been written by other communities, this compact grant. I'm curious what other people have found and done.
Yeah, so I was doing some research for this topic, and there are lots of communities that have sort of embarked on this process already. It's much more common in school districts. I think schools, a few years ago started doing this work. Municipalities are slowly following, but I was able to collect a handful of final reports from a number of communities that have completed audits. Some of them, like I said, are like racial equity audits, so looking at this through strictly a race lens. Some of them are more broad. Some of them are just municipalities, and some of them schools and municipalities partnered and did it together. So I can send those out to the committee so you guys can look through them and have an idea of sort of what a final report might look like. And some of just like the process, what the consultant went through to collect the data and how that informed the final report. And I think that will probably help us in drafting our RFP and figuring out what is it exactly that we're trying to, what do we want the end product to look like? What are we trying to get to? So I'm happy to send those out to the committee after tonight's meeting so that you guys can start to thumb through them.
Yes, please send that forward. Would love to see that information. Also, Deidre, you said you mentioned you might have access to the report that, or the equity audit. If you do have that, would love to look at that as well.
Right. I'm not sure. We have a Google Drive. I'm not sure that it's in there, but there was a slide deck from the final presentation. And I think the thing I liked about it was that there were the surveys and the interviews, but they also kind of triangulated on available data like attendance and race, ethnicity. So there were a lot of really good actionable findings, I think.
Okay, gotcha. If you have the slide deck, even that's also something great to kind of look at.
Sure, I'll take a look.
There's also
ask permission. I'll make sure that it's okay for me to share it first.
Yes, of course.
There is if you go to the Northborough Southborough website, they have a page. The school department has a page dedicated to it. They call it Equity of Opportunity, and I don't know if this is the report. It might just be like a shortened version for the website, but it does list sort of like what the goals or initiatives are that I think probably came from the result of that audit. And it sort of lays out like what the plan is to address. I assume some of the issues that were raised in the audit, but I'm not sure entirely, but it is helpful to sort of read through like ensuring excellence in the continuum of educational programming for student support services. And then it has a list of like the recommendations within that they're saying that the school should, implement to reach that goal of ensuring excellence for student support services. So it's kind of like it's how I envision the equity audit on the town side to go. Obviously not education specific, but it'll be around, instead of being around what services do we offer students, it will be around what services does the town provide to the community. So it'll be similar. So if nobody has any more comments or questions on that, I will, I'll make sure to send out the reports from the other communities that I found, so you guys can look through them. And then, like I said, we don't qualify for the funding until late spring, but we can still start working on what an RFP might look like, so that if and when we do receive the funding, we can move quickly to put that on the street and hire a vendor.
Thank you, Becca. So I guess the next thing on the agenda was the town administrator recruitment process, please.
Sure. So I just wanted to make sure that the committee was aware, our town administrator, who has served the community for, oh gosh, over 10 years at Virginia. It's been 13 years, maybe 13 or 14. You're muted, Virginia. We can't hear you.
Sorry.
That's
I think it's been closer to 15 years. It's been
Yeah.
a long time.
So I just wanted the committee to be aware that John has provided the select board with his formal resignation. He's been selected to serve as the next town administrator for the town of Foxborough. So he's going to be moving on to serve Foxborough. But the reason I want the committee to be aware is that the select board is embarking on a recruitment process to hire a new town administrator. So we're talking about essentially the chief administrative officer of the community. So it's a very important position. The board is planning to hire an executive recruiter, so a third party to come in and assist them with the recruitment process. They will do, I believe they plan to do a nationwide search. There will be opportunities for community input in what the town would like to see in the next town administrator, some of the traits. And so I thought it might be a good opportunity for this committee to think about, you know, you as individuals, as residents of the town, and also us as a committee will have an opportunity to provide feedback to the board about what we as a DEIB committee think are important characteristics in the next town administrator. So just be thinking about that as the process continues. We'll publicize the community input. There'll be probably some sort of forum or input session in which folks will have the opportunity to call in and talk to the the recruiter in developing the brochures and some of the marketing information for the town administrator.
Becca, may I suggest that at some point, I think there may be an opportunity for this committee to help the Board of Selectmen to understand appropriate interviewing questions and approaches. I've gotten feedback that there have been some not politically correct.
Yeah, so they'll be creating a screening committee, the board. The screening committee will conduct the initial round of interviews with the candidates. The candidates will, the screening committee, the makeup of the committee is not firmly established, so it's up to the board who they choose to put on the committee. Like it's not defined by charter or bylaw or anything like that. So, you know, I think I don't necessarily know for sure that one of our committee will have a seat on this screening committee, but if that were the case, certainly that would be an opportunity for this committee to have input in that process, in that interview process, and moving forward candidates to the board for consideration.
Becca, I'm talking about training how to interview, and not to be on the committee to do it, but to help our town to be proficient in that aspect of the process.
Yeah, I mean, that is the purpose for the executive recruiter. That's why they're bringing along the third party who does this for a living, who understands, what are the appropriate questions to ask, making sure that you're asking the same questions to all your candidates in the interest of fairness and equity. So it's a good sign that I think they've chosen to bring along a professional third party, because it's an important process for the community.
Any other comments and questions about the recruitment for the town administrator, please?
Would we be able to look at the questions and the rubrics or anything like that?
I don't see why not. You know, the candidates will be confidential, obviously, because the screening committee round is a confidential round, but I don't see why the committee couldn't have the opportunity to comment on the questions that will be developed. They'll likely be developed between, you know, the executive recruiter in partnership with the board. But like I said, I think the board is willing and wants to take into consideration community input, which through that process will inform some of those questions. But yes, certainly.
Thank you. If there weren't any more questions about this, then we could discuss any other business that Becca, you thought should be brought up before the committee or from any of our other members.
I don't have anything else, but
All right, then may I make a motion to adjourn the meeting until the next meeting?
I'll second that.
Thank you.
let me just confirm our next meeting date. So we are scheduled to meet again on April 3rd. Depending on the process for the town administrator recruitment, you know, we may want to meet before then, depending on how that process shakes out. They've just started, they haven't even hired the recruiter yet, but I do expect that to happen in the next week or two. So things will start moving quickly soon. So I'll be in touch.
So Becca, you think, are you suggesting we meet the Monday prior? So the last Monday of March, maybe?
Possibly. Depending on how the process is going, I'll send the committee an email. And, you know, we may want to meet sooner rather than later, but a lot of that is going to be dictated on how quickly the select board moves once they've selected a recruiter.
Thank you. All in favor? The gentleman? Aye.
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 I as well.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Then see you next time on the clock.